Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. We're talking about the Guthrie story. It's everywhere. The question is why? Well, here's the deal. The mother of Savannah Guthrie is the one that's being taken. I was wrong. She's an 84-year-old woman. And she was taken from her home, and at first they didn't know what was going on. Turns out there's a lot of evidence now that points to foul play, blood on the porch, signs that she didn't go willingly, and more. But the mother of Savannah Guthrie is the one that's been taken against her will, they claim. They believe she's alive. They don't believe they have a suspect. There was a ransom given, multiples, I guess, and they haven't confirmed if any of them are actual or real or whatever. Then somebody tried to follow up and do some crypto, and they were a fake ransom person, and they got caught and arrested. But Savannah Guthrie is kind of the key to this discussion, in my opinion, because Savannah Guthrie is a co-anchor on NBC's Today Show. Okay? And so, something has to do with fame or money or something strange there, and I don't know what it is. Now, it's in Tucson, Arizona, where she was taken. Pima County Sheriff, his name is Chris Nanos. He said investigators are operating on the assumption that she's still alive. They don't have really factual evidence that she's alive even, but they say they're going to operate with that in mind because they don't have any reason to believe she's not alive. Family begging to bring their mother back, saying that she needs her medication and, she can't do without it. And the police then saying, hey, bring her back quickly before you make things much worse. We're praying she's alive. We're praying for the family, but something's odd, as Dr. Bradley points out, with this story. Why does it dominate the news? Is it just because Savannah is a news anchor? What brings this family into the limelight? And why are the details so murky on this, but yet it garners news headlines almost 24/7 when other stories seeming to be just as big, 2 cops in Utah get shot and doesn't even hardly make the news. Why do these cases seem to pop up and become trending? And the answer is it's not done by accident. The media does it on purpose. What we don't know is the reasons, Doctor.
Well, that's the thing is that this is a complete enigma, and they've been breathlessly reporting for a whole week. Oh my goodness, I got to hear the latest news. Well, no, I heard that news Sunday morning. I mean, literally.
And it's sad. And our bringing this up doesn't mean we're not sad. Whenever something like this happens, it's sad. We want her back. We want her alive. All those things are true. So I don't want you to think we're just callous and we don't care. I say that because it sounds like we're just kind of like, who cares? We're not saying that. We're just saying this happens a lot in America. These kinds of stories happen to little kids, to parents, and they never even hardly make the news. Why this one blowing up is the real question, right, Doctor?
Absolutely. And I don't have a good answer for that, but I will tell you that I try and pay attention to the news feeds, and it was absolutely irritating to me that you couldn't hardly get a news feed this week with this not being the lead story that they were talking. They were
a week later. It was still in the top of the hour news we just played, Doctor. Even
absolutely, and there's just it's like holy Hannah, but there's something going on weird with all these other things that are ignored. But I might also say that it's just there's a whole strange scenario. They're starting to put up billboards about her. Well, they don't do that until it's a cold case normally. You're talking about where the sheriff and the lead local guys took it and they locked down the site and called it a crime scene, and then they took all their tape down and went away. It was probably 36 hours. That somebody came back, the FBI somebody strung new tape.
And every time you have that, there's this lapse in normal protocol, changes in what you normally do, weird ways the crime scene wasn't protected, so now it's all tainted. And the sad part is, I pray we get to the bottom of this one, but again, when I see investigations broaden, not narrow over time, it concerns me greatly. And I don't know what the reason is. The only thing I can think of is at this point, because we don't have any evidence and details in this, but it seems to be this. The Minnesota riots, that's really a distraction. Okay, the real issue is the Minnesota criminal activity that took place with billions of American taxpayer dollars by these Haitian migrants in bed with government officials. And what we should be doing is laser-like focus on that and arresting criminals and stopping this from happening. But then you get the distraction of Minnesota. Then you get the Epstein files released, 3 million pages of files. And then all of a sudden this thing comes up and wow, you don't hear too much about the Epstein files except for, the government did their due diligence and they released it all. But you got to ask the question, do we even have all the gory details of the Epstein files, the Epstein case released? And the answer is, I don't believe so at all. I believe we got a bunch of titillating information that'll just keep America talking forever and continue to be distracted. But we're not getting any real answers on Epstein at all. In fact, the plot just thickens and kind of drags everybody into the dragnet. Even the Mormon Church is mentioned in the Epstein files several times. I don't think that there's a reason that it ties Jeff to them, but nevertheless, it's mentioned. And so this is what I mean. We're just getting egg everywhere, and we're getting all these distractions. You got this lady that's disappeared now. You got the riots everywhere. You got the Epstein files everywhere. And all they got to do is throw 5 or 6 election fraud debates and all these things, in my opinion, take the pressure off. Wait a minute. Congress just sold us down the river again and kept the Joe Biden budget in place and kept the government open. And Donald, basically, who was backing RFK Jr., who laid off a ton of people and downsized his agency a lot. Now Congress has reversed all that. They say, we're taking the power of the purse. We're going to refund and bring all the employees back and crank up Bobby Kennedy's department once again. That all happened. Trump signed it. So now it's a betrayal to the American. All those things, though, are being covered up by all these titillating stories that in my opinion, we'll probably not get even answers to, Doctor.
Well, you mentioned there's dozens and dozens that could be the dog tail being wagged, or whatever. But stop and think about this. We have military assets that are scattered across the world in very aggressive positioning. We're very much involved in piracy on the high seas, picking up oil tankers. We've got a carrier strike group that's just off of Iran. Iran is picking up. They're replicating kind of what Trump is doing, in that they've now hijacked a couple of oil tankers by the Straits of Hormuz, which is a real choke point in this whole thing. We have got stuff going on all over, and sometimes it's kind of like one potential kidnapping. Fine, let's get her back. That's we got to do that. Let the police do their job.
It's a given. It's good. And by all means, if there's really updates in the case, or if there's ways that the American people can help, I get talking about it. But right now, what we're doing is just basically having people talk about. Pretty soon, it's just Bad Bunny and this lady and the riots, and now nothing really happening in government that's selling us down the river. And what's really happening behind the scenes is getting covered, right?
Right, and most Americans aren't even paying attention. And let's go back to the Melania thing. Like I say, this is way off my radar screen normally, but I did get contacted last night after the webinar, and this guy said to me, I must be living under a rock. I didn't even know this movie was being made. And it's kind of like, well, see, whatever we can do to kind of keep feeding the news cycle. And like I say, the stuff with the kidnapping, we knew stuff Sunday morning that came over the news feeds that was being touted as late as Thursday afternoon. And again, I try to pay attention on these things. And it was nothing new. I mean, it was just little titillating things that, there's another development. What? Let's listen. No, there's not. And so we've got this Iranian war pending at the behest of the modern state of Israel. It's just, holy Hannah, these things are monumental things. And we're all just kind of slathering over some kind of weird stuff that they keep feeding us. So I don't know. Keep your antennas up, people. There's got to be something afoot.
It's very interesting. There's, Donald Trump made a phone call and he's talking about, hey, I had some great discussion with Beijing and this and that. Palestinians are returning through Gaza, but then, hey, looks like Israel broke the ceasefire once again. Al Jazeera's in the news. I'm just telling you, it's interesting what we're seeing. They say Iran and the United States are holding indirect talks. Yeah. What are indirect talks, Doctor? It sounds like to me that they're playing telephone.
Well, maybe. I don't know. And what's Kirshner in the middle of these discussions with? I mean, it's kind of
I thought we got rid of Kirshner and he was a clown show the first time, and I thought we weren't going to have him around. But Donald continues to have that guy involved. And I think that causes a lot of problems and stuff.
Some people are saying he's the guy pulling the strings. Who knows? Maybe Bibi's the guy pulling the strings.
They say France and Canada plan to open consulates in Greenland, expanding Arctic diplomatic cooperation. A Russian intelligence official under Western sanctions was shot and wounded in Moscow. So we have a lot of weird stories behind the scenes that might have bigger repercussions than we think, folks. Let's see. U.S. government announces $6 million in aid for Cuba amid diplomatic tensions. Why are we giving money to Cuba? All right, hang tight. Liberty Roundtable Live.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever.
This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
Scott Bradley here. Most Americans are painfully aware that the nation is on the wrong track and in dire straits. Unfortunately, most political pundits only nibble around the edges when they claim to address the issues. Even worse, many of the so-called solutions are simply rewarmed servings of what got us into the mess we currently face. And the politicians think we're so gullible and naive that we'll buy their lies that they have reformed, and now understand where they led us astray. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that they simply wish to continue to hold power. The solution to America's challenges is found in returning to the timeless principles found in the United States Constitution. My book and lecture series will reawaken in Americans an understanding and love of the principles which made this nation the freest, most prosperous, happiest, and most respected nation on earth. Visit topreservethenation.com and order my book and lectures to begin the restoration of this great nation.
So I believe a lot of this is just flat out distraction, ladies and gentlemen. Everywhere we go, there's distraction. Zelensky's book teaches all you got to do is overwhelm the system with just too much information. And then you've got everybody focused on whatever their hot topic is. Some are on the Super Bowl, some are on the Winter Olympics, some are on this lady getting kidnapped, some are on the Epstein files, some are on the deal with Iran. Yeah, do we really have all the detail on the Epstein files? I would say not even close. What we've got is a bunch of distraction, titillating stuff. Hey, Jeffrey gave everybody fancy Rolex watches, and that was his calling card. He knew how to give great gifts, and he helped girls get into college, and he did this and that. But see, there's nothing really damning. It's just all titillating, and, there you go. I don't believe we have the deets on this thing at all, Doctor. I think we've just been played. What do you say?
Well, we are being played, I'm afraid, and there's even some of the young women that are wanting to take the website down because somehow, with all the redactions they did, redacting stuff that should never have been redacted, we think because we don't know because it got redacted, but some of these women's names are still available, and they're saying, no, take it down. Don't expose these people.
Yeah, see, that's been done, in my opinion, strategically to get these women to say exactly that. Then they go ahead and take it down and say, we're just obeying the public. The public realizes that Donald told you this was, going to go weird and sideways. And, okay, Bill Gates, they suggested that he got an STD from a, Russian hooker or something like this. And, you got all these weird, strange details and stuff like that are going on. But yet the real pay dirt, the things we need to know to put people in prison, the things we need to know to find out if that sex cartel after Jeffrey was taken out, did somebody just fill the void and continue? There was a lot of talk about Jeff wanted to go ahead and seed the world with his own DNA. And so, he's kind of like those doctors that, inseminate women with their own sperm instead of the, whatever was agreed to and all this kind of stuff. And so, he wanted to do that. And then they said, but there's no evidence of that. And then he was way into eugenics and, but nobody else is. That was just whacked out Jeff. That was just crazy old Adolf Hitler back in the day. Nobody else is involved. But these programs of eugenics, these programs of child trafficking, they're continuing unabated, Doctor. That's the real story.
Well, that's at least part of it. We don't know the story because they redacted so much. But let's just take an example. A lot of the times, and I obviously haven't been through 3 million pages of documents, but here we have an email. They don't say who sent the email or who received the email, and because those names are redacted, but the content of the email is there. It's not possible to identify the participants in it. It's not possible to pull on the strings and say.
So it's intentionally of no value.
It
doesn't
is.
matter how bad it is. If there's no to and from or whatever, you don't know who's involved. It means nothing. It's just a story, Doctor.
Well, it is. And so we're not getting any real to the bottom of anything. Now, I got to admit that the Brits have finally done something right. I mean, it's been probably 500 years, but they've kind of estranged themselves even further from Prince Andrew, the former Prince Andrew. I don't know what he's being called nowadays, but he's been booted out.
Yeah, but again, he's just denying he's not arrested or anything else. This one victim says she had sex with him 3 times when she was underage and everything else. And see, again, what more do you want than a person telling the story? Where's the Me Too movement that says these women should be listened to? And okay, none of that's taking place either. So it's a big scandal from the get-go, and we're being punked on the topic, that's for sure. And that tells me we're probably never going to get the deets. Never.
You're probably right, but at least the king and his family have said we want to, go way arm's length with Prince Andrew, and why aren't we doing that in this country? And the idea of foreign powers being involved in this whole intrigue, there's people who are saying, oh, there it is, Epstein's an agent of Putin, and it's like, you guys are deflecting from Mossad connections, and Ghislaine's father and his Mossad. It's his crowd. When he had his funeral, it was like a Mossad reunion. The thing is,
and the problem is Epstein has a different girlfriend now that they claim she's all innocent and was never part of anything, but she was his girlfriend. And a couple of days before he died, he literally signed documents and gave her $100 million and give Ghislaine a chunk of money and his brother Mark a chunk of money. And 2 days before his suicide, and then they're saying, there's nothing really here to see. That just smacks of some kind of inside job or some kind of a loan. Why would you change your will and sign that 2 days before you're dead? And why would you give your girlfriend $100 million if she has nothing to do with anything that you were working on and doing? And, all I'm telling you is Ghislaine, low level, takes the fall. The girlfriend walks away with $100 million, and then they tell us nothing's there, Doctor?
Yeah, there's just too many strange what ifs. And then there's some of the stuff on his autopsy. This perfect suicide that everybody went to sleep on, and the films went off and nobody checked and all this kind of stuff. And then they say, well, he somehow tore open some kind of bedding and hanged himself from the upper bunk. But they say, his butt was only 1 inch to 1.5 inches off the ground when he hanged himself. Well, if you've ever been under a real oxygen stress, you'll do almost anything to get more oxygen in you. And if you'll just have to flex your legs to take the pressure off your neck, what's the story here? Everything is questionable in my mind. And I just think that the more they come out with, the more I have to scratch my head. So,
yep. And the more you say they're covering up the eugenics agenda, who's all involved in that? Was it just whacked out Jeff wanting his sperm to be everywhere? Or was it really a eugenics experiment that he was involved in? What's the real story there? And we're not going to get any of that. What's the deal with his girlfriend? She basically was his girlfriend since 2010, so 9 years or whatever, and she doesn't know anything. She's innocent. She wasn't involved in any way. There's no evidence tracking her, tying her to anything, but yet she gets $100 million. At some point you go, things just are not adding up. And the more they focus on this, the broader and the more complicated and the more confusing the details get, and that's not by accident. Same thing with the Charlie Kirk assassination. I'm not going to go like Candace and tell you what happened because I don't know. But I'm going to tell you that we basically see the investigation continue to broaden, continuing to get more complicated and more confusing. We're seeing that with this lady. And we're seeing the Guthrie kidnapping. We're seeing that with the Charlie Kirk investigation. We're seeing that with the Epstein files. We're seeing that with, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, right? Now Bill and Hillary didn't get arrested. They say they're going to testify. I'm sure there's a deal made to where they don't ask them about certain things and everything else. I'd love that to be transparent, but we're not going to get any of that either. They're just going to basically let him off the hook. Well, meanwhile, all these distractions are happening. Now there's a big re-effort launched to call a con. Doctor, we're being conned everywhere, buddy.
Yeah, we truly are. You know, the con, for those that aren't really paying attention, is a Constitution Convention. And we could cover that for hours, literally. The new effort in the legislatures, we're kind of in the legislative session now. I mean, a lot of legislatures across the country are in session. They've got a lot of
it's the saddest part about winter, Doctor.
Say again?
It's the saddest part about winter.
Yeah, well,
they're all in session. That's
got to
a
be on
dangerous
guard.
environment, my friend.
The legislature's in session, so your life, liberty, and property are at risk. But this con, if you will, that's being, now they've got a different spin on it. They're saying, we've got to, whether it's a balanced budget amendment or whatever, we're trying to control the size of government and rein it back in and get the budget's balanced. Every single problem that they bring up as challenges we're facing today are related to our abandonment of the original principles of the Constitution. And what they want to return to in many instances is stuff that was in the original Constitution of the Articles of Confederation, like term limits and like recalls of senators and stuff like that, that actually they had a really, really bad experience with, and they left them out on purpose. And there's if you go back and you review that, you'll say, I understand why we don't have term limits. So at any rate, what they're doing now is they're trying to say, okay, we want that. What the big push in some of these that I'm looking at right now want to do a con that calls one state, one vote in the convention. And they say, that's how the founders did it in the original convention. But that's not how it's going to happen now. California has 39 million people. Wyoming has under 600,000. So if it was one state, one vote, Wyoming would have something like 63 or 64 times more power per capita than California has. The California senators and governors and representatives and the population itself, the newspapers, there's no way they're going to say one state, one vote. But that's, if they can get a state to say, we'll go with one state, one vote. Well, it's just one of those things. When they get in convention, they're not going to do it that way.
They'll just change the rules, buddy.
That's the convention rules. They'll set their own rules. They say, we're only going to have conversations about changes that are in the resolutions for a con. You can't have a single item or a few items on the list. All conventions, all things are on the table. And that's exactly what happened in 1787. But it's just a marketing ploy to get votes right now in the legislatures. And there's a couple of legislatures that are voting probably first of the week. And they're getting fairly close to being able to push this over the top and get us called into a convention. This is not a good year, not a good century to write a new constitution because of the acrimony.
Amen to that. Let's stick with the Constitution. Let's make the real become more like the ideal. And let's really work on obeying the Constitution. It worked when we obey it. When we don't, it doesn't work. Replacing it's the worst answer ever, because at least you can look back at the Constitution. It's got a 250-year history almost of it working quite well when we obey it. So why go to something that we don't even have any experience with, some new plan, some con game? Don't fall for the lie, ladies and gentlemen. Even Glenn Beck used to be for a con, and now he's come to his senses, and he says it would be a horrible disaster. So people need to understand there's no way you can control what happens once they get there, and that's the primary problem with it. Are we really considering war with Iran? I pray the answer is no, but predict the answer is yes. Dr. Bradley breaks it down in seconds on Liberty Roundtable Live.
proclaiming liberty across the land. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Rich Thomason. After more than 13 years, Attorney General Bondi says they finally got their man.
Today, I'm proud to announce that the FBI has arrested one of the key participants behind the Benghazi attack. Zubair al-Bakhash landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 3 a.m. this morning. He is in our custody. He was greeted by Director Patel and U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro.
The 2012 terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy compound in Benghazi, Libya, killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens. Another suspected mastermind of the attack was captured in 2014, subsequently convicted, currently doing prison time. The U.S. has hit another alleged drug-running boat in the Eastern Pacific. U.S. Southern Command says 2 alleged narco-terrorists were killed. The Los Angeles grocery store was busy when all of a sudden a car slammed into the store's bakery department.
There were multiple patrons that were inside. There's seating and table areas. We had, again, a total of 9 patients here. And tragically, 3 of those individuals were beyond any medical help. Despite our best intentions and our best efforts, they were determined dead on scene.
L.A. Fire Captain Eric Scott says 92-year-old motorist hit and injured a cyclist, then traveled about a block before driving into the store. Along with the 3 fatalities, 6 people were injured. Investigators call it a tragic accident. It is day 6 of the search for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today's Show co-host Savannah Guthrie, kidnapped from her Arizona home last weekend. And there's word Hall of Fame quarterback Sonny Jurgensen has died. He was 91. Watching Wall Street, the Dow is up more than 775 points. NASDAQ ahead almost 220 points. More on these stories, townhall.com.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm, and Chuck McDowell, definitely not an attorney. This is Chuck. Do you feel stupid for buying a timeshare? Don't. It's not your fault. You were most likely told you could rent it, and it was a great financial investment. And the deal was available today only. If this happened to you, contact your resort or Wesley Financial Group for help today.
Call Wesley now for your free exit information kit. 800-242-3131. 800-242-3131.
My name is Whitney Allen, and I'm a widow. After my husband died, the last thing I wanted to think about was money. Ethos made it affordable to get life insurance. Signing up was fast and 100% online. I knew that I could pay our mortgage and have food in the fridge. I could focus on my kids. No one ever tells you how much you're going to depend on that policy. I am so grateful we had coverage.
Get your free quote at ethos.com/save. That's ethos.com/save. Paid spokesperson. Time spent on application may vary. Online health questions required.
Why don't we say to the government writ large that they have to spend a little bit less? Anybody ever had less money this year than you had last? Anybody ever having a 1% pay cut? You deal with it. That's what government needs, a 1% pay cut. If you take a 1% pay cut across the board, you have more than enough money to actually pay for the disaster relief. But nobody's going to do that because they're fiscally irresponsible. Who are they? Republicans. Who are they? Democrats. Who are they? Virtually the whole body is careless and reckless with your money. So the money will not be offset by cuts anywhere. The money will be added to the debt, and there will be a day of reckoning. What's the day of reckoning? The day of reckoning may well be the collapse of the stock market. The day of reckoning may be the collapse of the dollar. When it comes, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you it has happened repeatedly in history when countries ruin their currency.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
Before the break, Sam asked a question that I don't believe is a rhetorical question. I think it's a very viable, critically important question. And it is, are we really considering go to war with Iran? Now, you look at what historically has been our approach to things. Every time we've had one of these things that we're going to go into, we always ramp up all our military assets into the area. You think about what happened with the Saddam Hussein thing that happened back in the first Gulf War, where we got 500,000 people there before we did anything. You look at what happens off of Lebanon or wherever, off Gaza. You look at what's happening right now in the Persian Gulf. We've got probably trillions of dollars of military assets there. If the truth be known, certainly many hundreds of billions, probably trillions of dollars there. And we're basically in confrontational mode. The Iranians are responding to a degree. They're doing live fire exercises in the Straits of Hormuz. And, I mean, that is narrowest is probably less than 30 miles wide, and a third of the not just America, world economy goes through there. And Trump had a big meeting with Bibi and Netanyahu, and Netanyahu wanted him to commit that the United States would intervene again with some more high firepower to make certain that the Iranian nuclear program was completely dehorned.
Why should Israel get nukes and Iran can't have them? Now, I'm not really for promoting nukes. I'm just saying, who gets to pick the winners and losers? And Iran says we have to have it because you guys are crazy. And, sadly, I'm not really agreeing with Iran, but I will say this. It does seem like we're the aggressors, Doctor. It's hard to say that that's not true.
Well, it is. And Israel got the nuke by stealing our technology. I mean, our finest friend, everything. But
did we put people in jail for that, by the way?
There have been people jailed, but there's been deals worked out where they get to be pardoned and live in Tel Aviv or wherever they want afterwards. But at any rate, the trigger points were bombing their nuke program again, and I think Iran is responding to that. I think they're dispersing their facilities widely across their nation, where it'll make more difficult for that to happen. Bibi wanted us to bomb if we could take out, not if, that they wanted taken out their ballistic missile system. And I think part of that is that they know darn good and well that their ballistic missiles, some of them are hypersonic, at least. They're going to be mighty difficult to deflect if, in fact, it comes down to that. And the third thing is, well, let's say if you don't treat your protesters good, we're going to take you out for that. So we've got billions.
And we're not treating our protesters good either.
No, all of this are enigmas, and so the trigger points, and Iran really would do a regionalized war. There's no question about that. They're a very large country, 92 million people. Their geography is large. They have elevations there that make helicopter operation even less effective. If we got boots on the ground there, look what happened when Iran and Iraq. They have more
capabilities than we're giving them credit to. Trump said, hey, I took out their capabilities that would be in way worse shape if I didn't do that not too long ago. The problem is they have way more capabilities than we think. These guys can keep wars going on forever, right?
Well, they spent 10 years in trench warfare with Iraq. I mean, horrific conditions, mustard gas and, all sorts of chemical warfare, the artillery barrages, and it was just a killing field, the minefields and everything. I mean, it was World War I replayed over there. But if it comes down to the U.S. putting boots on the ground, to contain this country of 92 million people with the geography that's involved, and there's some pretty adverse conditions.
It's not possible to do that, Doctor. It's not possible to do that.
It's just not going to happen. But
the only way to do that is if you just absolutely destroyed everybody.
Well, and honestly, the regional warfare that'll come out of that will be a pretty dramatic war. And I would say that if they launch some of their hypersonic missiles against a carrier We lost a carrier. Suddenly it's going to be our war. I mean, suddenly everybody's going to say, this is ours. We're going to do it. And it's kind of what happened in Southeast Asia.
And we have to, because we've been assaulted. And we, hey, it's the problem with that plan is, why are we there in the first place? Why are we in a position to be provoked or in a position to be trapped into making it our war? We ought not be there at all, Doctor.
Well, that's the thing. People say, well, don't you support the troops? Yeah, I do. I do support the troops. Let's not put them in harm's way.
Depends on what you mean by support the troops, though.
Yeah, we don't put them in harm's way. We don't make it so that there's going to be some killed in a Syrian oil field, exchange. Whatever.
Supporting troops doesn't mean put them over there without reason. We're in over 130 nations militarily. If we cared about our troops, we'd bring most of them home, Doctor.
Well, that's true, and maybe we could get our arms around, making sure we've secured this country, and we'll be less likely to be attacked and everything. They say, we got to fight them over there. We'll have to fight them here. What was the excuse now for the stuff that happened?
Well, if we fight them here, at least we don't have gnarly supply lines to worry about. They do. We don't. And if we fought them here, the question becomes, do they really come here? And if so, what kind of mass delivery could they even bring? It would change the game. And so God teaches us in the scriptures too, don't go chasing people in their other lands and stuff. You lose the moral high ground when you do that. If you defend yourself and fight on your own ground, it's a different discussion if you're being invaded or overran or whatever else. But we seem to think we can chase people all around the world and be on the moral high ground. It's a lie.
And it's completely the antithesis of what Trump ran for office on. I'm going to be the peace president. No more eternal wars or, forever wars, whatever he called them. The fact of the matter is we're entering these things at the behest of a foreign power that we have there's not a justification anywhere. It's as stupid as entering World War I. But that's the problem we've got. Now, you think about this, if it becomes our war, because we lost a lot of people. Let's just take the Ia Drang Valley. That in Vietnam, it was not our war until we nearly lost a battalion of men in a skirmish that went really upside down. It was saved ultimately and finally.
But why are we even in that skirmish in the first place?
That's right. I mean, you think about, are we supposed to be in Tehran? Well, we weren't supposed to be in Ia Drang or Ah Sha or Khe Sanh or Tan Son Nhut or Hue. I mean, none of these things there was no reason in the world for us to be there. And we did, and we lost 58,000 people. We had hundreds of thousands more maimed. And we killed millions of Vietnamese.
Billions of dollars. I mean, it's just a disaster. We looked like the bully of the world. We had no plan. But again, that's what happens when you violate the checks and balances in the United States, though. Let's talk to Congress about war in Iran. And right now, they're pretty happy to let the Donald do whatever he wants to and act unilaterally because they don't want to take the blame when it goes south. What they need to do, though, is stand up and be counted and say, look, we're not going to war with Iran. We're not doing it. There's no reason, and we're going to pull back troops. But see, they've funded and allowed Donald to do this with the latest expenditure. They've literally given, $1 trillion to war? The most
it's actually,
to war?
The effort is over $1 trillion, I guess, now with the budget.
It is. I just don't know how much. So I'm saying $1 trillion. But look, Donald said we could operate on half that. But then yet they give him the most any president has ever had for war in a time of peace. Something's not adding up behind the scenes, I believe. Somebody wants war. And if we're not careful, and this is why we're speaking out so boldly right now, we've got a window of opportunity. If we're not careful, it's going to be so. And I pray we can stop it, is the point.
Absolutely. We are following a destructive path that is un-American. And as John Quincy Adams says, we go not abroad for monsters to destroy. We really only focus within our own lands. And that's international protocol since really 1648. Every other country stands alone within their own sovereignty. We do too. And if you say, well, we can intervene because they got protesters, they're not treating right. So do we. Should some other country, a supranational organization, the United Nations, a NATO, or whomever, BRICS, I don't know.
And now they say Cuba's on the ropes because, hey, the Venezuelan oil deal, and now Cuba's in serious trouble, and they're about to, throw the big BK, big bankruptcy and meltdown. And, how's that all going to go too, Doctor? Unless we jump in and do something there's going to create a vacuum. It's going to be filled by the communists if we're not very careful. I mean, there's threats of our own making now.
Well, I thought Cuba was communist. I mean,
it is, but just imagine if the current leadership falls, is a worse group going to come in to rescue it?
Well, and that's the thing. What if we took it as a protectorate? I mean, I certainly am not advocating that. But let's just say we did. Look at what Puerto Rico's been. Cuba would be 100 times worse. I mean, they're upside down and backwards in every single way. What do we think we're doing by dinking around?
If we do that, then China just grabs Taiwan real quick. I mean, we're starting it's just a disaster.
Good for the goose, good for the gander.
We need to set the example, folks, big time. I don't want to consider war against Iran. I don't want to consider war against Hamas. I don't want to consider war against Russia or the Ukraine or any of I don't want to pick sides in any of this, Dr. Bradley. I do want peace and prosperity at home, and the best way to do it is for we the people to turn to God Almighty and repent. And the best way we can do it is we can bring our troops home. If we're really for our troops, if we're behind our troops, the best thing we can do is bring them home to safety to protect the United States of America. All right, birthright citizenship before the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about that coming up. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live.
Attention collectors and savvy investors. We are excited to announce a momentous evolution in our journey. Introducing Freewater Coin Company, formerly known as Rust Coin and Gift. This rebranding takes us back to the very roots of where it all began. Freewater, Oregon. It's a tribute to the legacy of Al Rust and a celebration of 3 generations of dedication to excellence in the world of coins and precious gifts. Al, Brian, and Jake Rust standing strong through 64 years of service. Discover a world of exceptional service at Freewater Coin Company, your premier destination for genuine, honest money and precious gifts. Under Brian's expert guidance, Freewater Coin Company, building on the legacy of Rust Coin and Gift, continues its tradition of trust and excellence. Visit us at our Provo, Utah location. Explore our treasures online at freewatercoinco.com or call us at 801-377-1574. Freewater Coin Company, where your future is built one honest coin at a time.
As you are aware, America is divided over every fault line possible. This is intentionally fostered by those who do not love God, family, or country. We believe a peaceful future as a free people absolutely depends on civility. Clarion Call for Civility is looking for funding and volunteers at every level to make our hopes and efforts a reality. Please donate, sign our pledge, and help us in our sacred cause. Please visit callforcivility.com for more details. Callforcivility.com.
Bypass the mainstream narrative with Liberty News Radio at libertynewsradio.com. Engage with charismatic hosts live or on demand. We cover the crucial news focused on God, family, and country. News that other networks simply refuse to use. Think of LNR's hard-hitting news and podcasts at your fingertips, anytime, anywhere. Join us at libertynewsradio.com. Empower your day with the truth, because the truth will set you free. libertynewsradio.com.
Birthright citizenship at the Supreme Court, ladies and gentlemen. How's that going to go, Doctor?
Well, if the Supreme Court, now again, always I caveat everything that they're going to do with a kind of a preposition that they're going to follow the Constitution. Like, for example, with the tariffs, you can predict that, but it's hard to say right now. But with this birthright citizenship thing, Trump just came out probably within the last 2 weeks. The latest information, we can prove that this thing about, come here and have a baby, they're a citizen, is not the intent. Well, some of us that have been in this battle for many decades have been using that information for those decades. And Trump's position is absolutely correct. It was set aside in 1982 in the Plyler v. Doe case, where Brennan put a footnote in an opinion that said basically anybody that's born here is a birthright citizen. So that starts to, in many people's minds, offset the natural born citizen concept requirement that was put into Article 2 of the Constitution. And so now they're saying, because of the 14th Amendment, anybody that's born here is a citizen. That was not the original intent nor the original definition of how citizenship was defined. Citizenship followed the father's citizenship. And if someone was here from another country, let's say they were here from France, husband and wife were visiting, They had a baby. It was the place of birth, but not the country of citizenship. The United States did not become a country of citizenship. And so in the 14th Amendment, they put in this clause about that's been interpreted by Brennan and others that, if you're born here, you should be able to be a citizen. And so based upon that erroneous reading, somebody like Kamala Harris was able to be a vice president and ran for president. Ted Cruz is highly unlikely that he would qualify to be president under the Article 2 definition the founders used, and we could talk about that at great length. He could possibly, but there would have to be some proof in the pudding, if you will, as to how that might be justified. And then, of course, Marco Rubio absolutely does not qualify based upon the original stuff. So anyway, Trump it was almost the first day in office. He says we're going to get rid of this birthright citizenship nonsense, and it's in the Supreme Court. I was expecting a ruling by the end of January, but obviously I missed that. But the evidence that he's brought forth in the information that's clarifying information between 1868 and today would indicate that he's correct. And the statements of the Senator Jacob Howard, that was a principal author of the 14th Amendment, prove that too. But whether the Supreme Court will rule correctly is another question, because if you start saying everybody that was born here that wasn't a child of a U.S. citizen is no longer or considered a citizen, that's going to turn a lot of things upside down. So there's going to be a lot of flailing around about this thing. And I'm sure
and from experience, the courts have become so politicized too that they're not going to do the right thing by saying, hey, we're going to just look at the law, look at the history, understand the intent of the founders and apply it properly. What they're going to do is somehow try to give everybody a piece of the pie and walk this tightrope, if you will, very, very, very carefully to say, hey, how do we make everybody happy in this thing to the best of our ability, or make everybody slightly unhappy, but not too unhappy? And they're not really thinking about, in my mind, going about it in the way the founders would go about it, or what the law would literally call for. They're going to go with some tweaked interpretation, manipulation of the law, I can tell you right now, because that's what they always do in recent times, Doctor.
Well, as Washington said, seek truth and pursue it steadily. And
that's what I want
really
to do. That's
what
for
we've got
sure.
to do. The United States Constitution is written in plain English words, and each one of those words has a meaning. Each one of those meanings may be known.
Imagine that.
You can't change the definition of those words decades and even centuries later and say, oh, no, it really meant this. No, it can only mean what it meant at the day it was written.
All right, I got a final story before the end of the hour, ladies and gentlemen, that I want to get to. A new, and I don't know who this is, Marist poll. So I don't know who Marist is. I know who Gallup is and some of those others, but there's a new Marist poll out, and it reveals that 56% of Americans believe that tariffs harm the U.S. economy. Yep. 31% say they're beneficial. 12% see no significant impact at all. The survey indicates what they call a partisan divide, with 87% of Democrats and 63% of independents thinking that they're bad, compared to only 20% of Republicans. According to the poll, 54% of the American people prioritize lowering prices over controlling immigration. I'm just telling you it's because people are deceived on tariffs. Tariffs improperly applied by a single man known as Donald, without Congress involvement, is a disaster, and you see it. Americans are paying more in goods and services because of the tariffs, because we haven't really decreased taxes. We've left the IRS in place. So we've just piled tariffs on top of taxes, which means tax on top of tax, insult on top of injury. And so Americans believe tariffs are bad because of what they've seen. But if tariffs are used properly, directed by Congress, minimalistic, but yet playing the role of allowing the free markets to work, creating a level playing field, using tariffs to stop bad actors or reduce dumping on our product or on our markets and everything else. If we were to leave it to the free market, the government created a level playing field, and tariffs were used responsibly by Congress, carried out by the president with congressional approval, see, we wouldn't be in this bind where Americans think tariffs are bad. Tariffs are great. They're just not great when you put tariff on top of tax, and they're not great when you wield them like a weapon. Dr. Bradley?
Well, tariffs are constitutional, but they have been abused. And think of 1828 and the abominable tariffs and all those kind of things, the bringing about of the so-called Civil War and all that. But you're absolutely correct. It is a constitutional delegation to Congress. The president can't do it, and Congress can't delegate it to him. And Congress has. That's part of the problem, is that Congress has said, oh, we don't want to do our job. We're going to give the president this. And so the president has gone, I don't know, rogue, and he's playing with them. Now, if the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution according to the plain English words, they're going to say, Donald, you're out of line. But the Congress has been out of line in purporting to delegate to the president certain constitutional authority that he doesn't have. And so what we have is a weaponized system, and it is a tax, and it is costing us more. And we have not diminished our other tax burden. And that gets back to one of my kind of aphorisms in that most legislatures and the legislators think of we, the citizens, we, the people, of simply a revenue source for government processes and policies.
Which
and
is a disaster.
projects. And we're not completely tapped out yet. And the tariffs will tap us out partially anyway again. So
and you say, well, hey, we have less taxes than we did before because Donald did put some tax things in place. The problem is that just means we're borrowing even more because they have not reduced spending to relate to that as well. Now, the other thing I find out about this poll that's to me disaster, it says, according to the poll, 54% of Americans prioritize lowering prices over controlling immigration. I don't know why you would put that in a poll. Again, you're trying to pit people against people. What does lowering immigration have to do with prices? They're not mutually exclusive. You can't say, well, if we work on immigration, we can't lower prices. We can't lower prices. Government doesn't have the authority to lower prices. The only thing that can lower prices is a stable economy based on true supply and demand principles with free association and free involvement and let the supply and demand call the shots. Until then, you can't lower prices, doctor. If to do so, you'd have to subsidize prices, or you'd have to manipulate prices in some government force kind of a way. I reject that force. I reject that manipulation. I don't need prices to fall. What I need to do is have a stable playing field to work in and let the free market rock and roll, baby. That's what we need, but we're not even close to getting it. In fact, it's getting worse.
Well, what's Mondami doing in New York? I mean, he's establishing price controls. And what it's doing is it's going to really turn that economy upside down. So really the government is engaged and involved in stuff that they really have no authority to be in. Basically the general welfare clause was to create a government setting that was predictable and stable. And by, your economy having proper money that's legal and has value and keeping domestic violence down and having justice in the courts and preventing international intrigue and attack. Those are the things that allow people to go in and succeed. And so that's what the founders created. And nowadays they want this communistic, socialistic manipulation of everything. They want to pull the government levers on behalf of themselves. I want free school. I want free medical care. I want whatever, this and that and the other. And what's happening is the chains and shackles of bondage for tyranny are becoming forged and are weighing heavily upon us because we're turning over to the government the entirety of everything of our lives. And that was, we're not supposed to be a Mother May I society. If you had a stable, predictable society, you could go out, you could get married, you could start a family, you could start a farm, you could start a business. I mean, any number of things could be carried out successfully, and that's what Americans did. And we became most prosperous because of that. And we're losing all of that because of the government intervention.
We're flat out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you right now, I pray we don't go to war. I pray that we embrace peace as we prepare a people to receive the Prince of Peace when he comes. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about God, family, and country. It's about we the people having fidelity to God's commandments. Love the Lord thy God and love thy neighbor. Those are threaded through all the 10 commandments. Keep the Sabbath day holy. The first 4 relate to loving God, and the last 6 relate to loving your fellow man. Those are the guidelines that can make men free, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the guidelines that can put America on a hill once again. A light on a hill. We pray for the Savior's return. We testify he lives and he loves us. And the way to peace, prosperity, and stability is to obey God Almighty. God save our republic.